Mangwanani mwalelepo vukenjani tlekas vanave Africa. Welcome to Africa Good Morning, the news and current affairs show bringing you everything you need to know happening in the Southern African region and beyond. My name is Ashwin Berry, and today is Cotton Candy Day. There exists in the world small clouds of utter delight, floating multicolored strands of spun sugar all wrapped around a stick or served in a bag. Everything from the machine that produces this treat to the men and women who operate it, and the very flavor it leaves in your mouth is purely magical. Here's a video on Cotton Candy Day. Today is Tuesday, the 7th of December, and here are your top stories. Explosions, attacks in Mali, Niger kill over 100. Explosions rocked a truck and a UN camp in Mali on Sunday, while another attack targeted an international military base in neighboring Niger. West African nations have struggled to contain jihadist insurgencies in the region, with some groups pledging fealty to terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda or the so-called Islamic State. The attack in Niger was aimed at a base that countries in the region used to fight insurgencies. Officials said 79 attackers and 29 soldiers were killed. The attack in Mali hit a truck carrying dozens, leaving at least 31 people dead. In the northern city of Gao in Mali, 2 explosions rocked a UN camp early on Sunday. The blast shook the barracks of the UN mission in Mali. Those who were inside were forced to take refuge in nearby shelters for 2 hours. The federal government in both West African nations has little control outside cities in the vast deserts that comprise the countryside. Additionally, both countries are desperately poor, ranking at the very bottom and near the bottom of the UN's Development Index. In our next story, hundreds of women protest against gender-based violence in Ivory Coast. Hundreds of women marched in Abidjan on Saturday to protest violence against women and to demand punishment for rapists. Under the slogan Orange the World, organized by the UN Women's Generation Equality, women in Ivory Coast and around the world participated in different activities to call the attention and create awareness about the violence suffered by thousands of women and girls every day. Rape has to be punished, and we are here to show that everybody has to be aware of the fact that when a woman says no, it's no, said Claude Cohon during the march. Ambassadors and representatives of the United States, Spain, Switzerland, Turkey, and other countries in Ivory Coast attended the demonstration. The 16 days of the Orange the World campaign takes place in different countries, demanding solutions against gender-based violence. Aid group says tribal violence kills 24 in Sudan's Darfur. Tribal clashes between Arabs and non-Arabs killed at least 24 people on Sunday in Sudan's western Darfur region, an aid group said. It was the latest bout of intercommunal violence to rock the conflict-stricken region. Rigo said Arab militias known as Janjaweed attacked the camp early Sunday, torching and looting properties. At least 35 others were wounded, he said. The violence in Nick was the latest to rock West Darfur in recent weeks. Last month, a land dispute between Arabs and non-Arabs in the Jebel Moon area led to bloody clashes that left at least 17 people dead and 12 others wounded. The Darfur conflict broke out when rebels from the territory's ethnic Central and Sub-Saharan African community launched an insurgency in 2003, complaining of oppression by the Arab-dominated government in Khartoum. Al-Bashir's government responded with a campaign of aerial bombings and raids by the Janjaweed, who stand accused of mass killings and rapes. Up to 300,000 people were killed and 2.7 million were driven from their homes. Al-Bashir, who is imprisoned in Khartoum, faces international charges of genocide and crimes against humanity related to the Darfur conflict. In our next story, Gambia's Adama Barrow elected for a second term. President Adama Barrow from the Gambia won a second term in power after election results were announced late on Sunday. Barrow garnered more than 53% of the vote, according to the Electoral Commission. Speaking to his supporters, Adama Barrow promised a brighter future for the country. "I will be the lucky person to be chosen by you. I sincerely assure you, each and every one of you, that I will do all I can and utilize every resource at my disposal to make the Gambia a better place for us all," said the president. Adama Barrow faced 5 challenges in the election. On hearing the results, Gambians celebrated on the streets of Banjul. Barrow will develop the country again because Barrow will build new roads, new bridges, and Gambian people will have peace and love and harmony. "There is no more dictatorship in the Gambia," said Siri Jallow, a Barrow supporter. In our next story, it's COVID. South Africa readies hospitals as Omicron variant drives new COVID-19 wave. South Africa is preparing its hospitals for more admissions as the Omicron coronavirus variant pushes the country into the 4th wave of COVID-19 cases, President Cyril Ramaphosa said on Monday. Ramaphosa said in a weekly news letter that Omicron appeared to be dominating new cases in most of the country's 9 provinces and urged more people to get vaccinated against COVID-19. South Africa now has sufficient supplies of vaccines. Vaccination is essential for our economic recovery because as more people are vaccinated, more areas of economic activity will be opened up, he said. Scientists in South Africa and other countries are racing to establish whether Omicron is more contagious, causes more severe disease, and is more resistant to existing vaccines. But some anecdotal accounts from doctors and experts in South Africa are reassuring, suggesting that many infections it causes are mild. In our next story, Angolan opposition re-elect Adalberto Costa Jr. as leader. In Angola, the main opposition party, UNITA, re-elected Adalberto Costa Jr. as leader of the opposition. In October, the Constitutional Court annulled his 2019 election as party leader. The decision of the court was announced on the same day that UNITA formed a coalition with 2 other groups to increase its chances of defeating the long-ruling MPLA in elections due in August 2022. The time has come to build a new and better Angola without unrealistic promises and megalomaniac projects, a working Angola where everyone has a place and to which everyone can contribute, stated the reappointed leader of the opposition after the announcement of his victory. From UNITA, President Isaias Samukuva stepped in as interim leader after Jr.'s ousting in October, that is former UNITA president. Costa Jr., 59, is seen as the main threat to President João Lourenço, 67, who is expected to seek a second term. In our next story, at least 23 die when bus heading to wedding swept into river in Kenya. At least 23 people died after a bus carrying choir members to a wedding plunged into a river in Kenya on Saturday, police said. Mwingi East Sub-County Police Commander Joseph Yakana says the driver tried to steer the bus past a flooded bridge, but the strong current swept the vehicle into the river. The choir members of Mwingi Catholic Church had been traveling for their male colleague's wedding when the accident occurred in Kitui County. Officials said the incident is under investigation. Onlookers screamed as the yellow school bus hired to take a church choir and other revelers to the ceremony in Kitui County keeled over and sank the driver as the driver tried to navigate the surging waters. It remains unclear how many passengers were aboard the bus. Witnesses said the driver had stopped to negotiate the river and was close to the other side when the bus was swept beneath the churning currents. In our next story, next pandemic could be more lethal than COVID, vaccine creator says. Future pandemics could be even more lethal than COVID-19, so the lessons learned from the outbreak must not be squandered, and the world should ensure it is prepared for the next viral onslaught, one of the creators of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine said. The truth is the next one could be worse. It could be more contagious or more lethal or both, Sarah Gilbert said in the Richard Dimbleby lecture, The BBC reported. Gilbert, a professor of vaccinology at the University of Oxford, said the world should make sure it is better prepared for the next virus. There are additional changes that may mean antibodies induced by the vaccines or by infection with other variants, which may be less effective at preventing infection, when she was commenting on Omicron. Until we know more, we should be cautious and take steps to slow down the spread of this variant. In our next story, 2.9 billion people still offline. An estimated 37% of the world's population, or 2.9 billion people, have never used the internet. New data from the International Telecommunication Union, the United Nations Specialized Agency for Information and Communication Technologies, also reveals strong global growth in internet use, with the estimated number of people who have used the internet surging to 4.9 billion in 2021 from an estimated 4.1 billion in 2019. Of the 2.9 billion still offline, an estimated 96% live in developing organization that works to improve the quality of life for disabled women in the Ivory Coast. Ange Grace Beho, who lost her right arm in a traffic accident, started the Mongan Foundation earlier this year. I had a traffic accident and I found myself with this disability. Afterward, I noticed that there were no young women with disabilities in the field. There were more men and women of a certain age, says Beho. So I brought my sisters together to create a foundation which will really help them without having to wait for state aid, so that they can be independent and take charge of themselves. About 20 women, including wheelchair users and amputees, took to the catwalk sporting looks from local designers. Around the world, people with disabilities face greater challenges and stigma than non-disabled people. They are less likely to access healthcare, education, employment, and to participate in their communities. Advocates say that disability inclusion is a crucial condition to uphold human rights and to ensure that people with disabilities are not left behind. All right, that brings us to the end of our top stories, but we still have much, much more to go. This is Africa Good Morning, bringing you the news as you need it. See you after the break. In the next report, Alexandre Soares of UN News takes stock of the recently concluded COP26, hoping to answer questions like, what did COP26 mean to the world? He looks at the highlights and conclusions. Have a look.
It's time to go into emergency mode, or our chance of reaching net zero will itself be zero. We are in the fight of our lives. Never give up, never retreat. Keep pushing forward.
That was United Nations Secretary General António Guterres encouraging young people and everyone concerned about our planet to keep up the fight against climate change. After 2 weeks of tough negotiations, the 26th UN Climate Conference has come to an end. Member states reached an agreement that the Secretary General called an important step, but not enough. So what's in the text? Let's break it down. Starting with emission cuts. Countries agreed current plans are not enough to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees and pledged new actions to reach the goal. On coal, the intention was to completely phase it out, but states agreed to phase it down. Countries also agreed to double the proportion of climate finance going to adaptation and to do more to reach the goal of $100 billion for developing nations to deal with the climate crisis. But what does it all mean for our economies, our lives, our future? To explain all these, we have with us Martina Donlon, who leads climate communications at the UN. Martina, thank you so much for being here. From all the initiatives, all the agreements that were announced, can you pick three that are the most impactful?
Yes, hello, and thanks for having me. As you said, and as the Secretary General has said, the final text is a compromise, and it's not enough, especially for small island states and other vulnerable countries. But it does provide some positive steps forward. One of them is that countries agreed to accelerate action during this decade, this decisive decade when global emissions must be cut in half to reach the temperature goal of 1.5 degrees. And the Glasgow Agreement actually calls on countries to present stronger national action plans next year instead of the original timeline, which was 2025. Also, as you mentioned, the pact calls for a phase down of coal and a phase out of fossil fuel subsidies, two key issues that have never been explicitly mentioned in a decision at climate talks before, despite coal, oil, and gas, of course, being the key drivers of global warming. So Glasgow did signal an accelerated shift away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energy. That would be my first point. The second point I'd like to mention is that the Glasgow Pact calls for doubling of finance to support developing countries in adapting to the impacts of climate change. This won't provide all the funding that poorer countries need, but the fact that developed countries agreed to double their collective funds for adaptation is a major improvement. The Secretary General has pushed really hard for increased financing to protect lives, to protect livelihoods, and this will especially benefit least developed countries and small islands. And my third point would be that there were a host of other deals and announcements, such as on methane, on coal, on forests, on transport, that could all have very positive impacts if they're indeed implemented. But most of these are voluntary commitments, and there are no guarantees that governments, investors, and corporations will deliver.
Will people notice differences in their lives? How is this new pact gonna affect us?
Well, we probably won't see immediate impacts in our daily lives, but the decisions taken at COP26 will affect decisions by governments on a range of activities and will eventually translate into noticeable differences in people's lives. COP26 also sent a signal to markets that changes are in order and that it's no longer okay to invest in heavily polluting sectors. So these changes will have an impact on our lives and probably sooner than we think. For example, the move away from fossil fuels means we will see more electric cars, and they will become more affordable and increasingly powered by wind and solar energy. The phasing out of coal means people in heavily polluted cities will have cleaner air to breathe and fewer respiratory illnesses. And the increase in finance for protecting lives and livelihoods could mean that small islands can actually put in place early warning systems for floods and storms, and small farmers may have access to more reliant and more resilient crops and seeds to protect food security. So the decisions at the global level do eventually impact everyone's lives.
What is the UN now doing to make the agreement a reality and then to push it forward?
The UN has been tirelessly pressing for the full implementation of the Paris Agreement, and the Glasgow Climate Pact is an agreement that will help implement the Paris Agreement. And the Secretary General will keep pushing for more ambition and for more action. He has actually urged countries to update their national climate plans every year throughout this decade, and he will convene heads of state for a global stocktake summit in 2023. He has also announced the establishment of a high-level expert group that will propose clear standards to measure and analyze net zero commitments by non-state actors. because not only national governments need to be held accountable, also cities, companies, and financial institutions that have pledged to reach net zero by 2050. We have to make sure these commitments are credible and verifiable and will actually translate into action. So the work continues. The work for COP27 has already started. And as the Secretary General said, we will never give up.
Thank you so much, Martina. Throughout the conference, our UN communication teams were in Glasgow to transport you there. Our colleagues, Laura Quiñones, Connor Lennon and Grace Barrett, brought you the latest news and flavor of this historic gathering. On our websites, you can read about all the decisions, check the latest newsletter, watch the videos, or listen to the podcasts. Before leaving Glasgow, Laura and Connor took a look back on all the action.
It's hard to believe we've come to the end of COP26 after two, got to say, very long weeks.
Very,
some very long days.
long weeks.
But it's been very stimulating. We've met some really interesting people, some experts in the field, delegates, negotiators, all these people who've come here to try and win a very difficult task, bringing together 197 countries with a common aim.
Yeah, and keeping our world to heating more than 1.5 degrees. That's a very giant challenge.
I remember back at the beginning when we spoke to some of the veterans, the people who come to COPs every year, they all said that the atmosphere this year is very different from previous COPs.
Yeah, they were very hopeful. They said it's the first time that a lot of these leaders actually come with all this ambition and all these actual concrete goals. Of course, it's never enough. There's still a lot more to do, but this COP was especially important and different because of it.
Well, for me, the tone was set by two speeches at the beginning.
Oh, yes.
One of which was from our Secretary General,
Yes.
Antonio Guterres, who, as usual, had some very forceful words to say.
The 6 years since the Paris Climate Agreement have been the 6 hottest years on record. Our addiction to fossil fuels is pushing humanity to the brink. We face a stark choice. Either we stop it or it stops us. And it's time to say enough.
And another speech, the one that had the stirring music and the inspiring words, was from Sir David Attenborough.
Yes, I was in the room and it was really moving to hear him live. You know, I've been hearing him for so many years in these documentaries and TV shows, and then just to be there and see this 95-year-old man just going at it, it was beautiful.
In my lifetime, I've witnessed a terrible decline. In yours, you could and should witness a wonderful recovery. That desperate hope, ladies and gentlemen, delegates, excellency, is why the world is looking to you and why you are here.
A 95-year-old man who has more energy than people half his
Than the
age.
two of us, yeah.
The two of us right now, especially at this stage of the proceeding. I felt, Lara, that right from the beginning it seemed they wanted to start with a bang, and we had a flurry of significant seeming announcements right from the off.
Yes, from day 2 is when the announcements started, and the first one was about forests. On Energy Day, including major coal users, including Poland, Vietnam, and Chile, they agreed to shift away from coal, which is one of the biggest CO2 emissions generator. There was also a big call by the private sector. They show strong engagements with 500 global financial services firms, which agreed to align about 130 trillion, 40% of the world financial assets, with the climate goals set in the Paris Agreement. And regarding green transport, over 100 national governments, cities, states, and major businesses signed the Glasgow Declaration of Zero-Emission Cars and Vans. And what is this going to do is end the sale of internal combustion engines by 2035 in leader markets and in 2040 worldwide. There was also a big surprise. The top China negotiator in Kerry came out that day and they announced this agreement, which was actually a joint declaration in which they said they had agreed to take steps on a range of issues, including methane emissions, which was one of the big announcements, transition to clean energy, and decarbonization. They also commit to keep this 1.5 degrees goal alive.
As expected, there were quite a few protests and demonstrations outside and inside the hall.
Every day.
Security
almost.
was very tight around the conference centre, but the first weekend is when we saw the really big demonstrations with Greta Thunberg, very colourful, very musical, very often. Coming inside the conference centre, yesterday there was a people's plenary, and this was like a takeover of the whole event by civil society groups. And then they staged the symbolic walkout.
It was a very powerful message. They left the blue zone and then they met another group of protesters that were outside. And they stayed almost all day waiting for the resolution of the conference.
And there were many indigenous groups represented.
Yes, they have been very active during the whole 2 weeks. We have seen them in the negotiation rooms. We have seen them at the pavilions, at the protests. They have been very vocal about the protection of their land and how they can help and support the 1.5 goal, because they're the actual experts when it comes to take care of nature and live in harmony with nature.
For young activists, indigenous people, scientists and governments from around the world, the work now continues. And the Secretary General said it clearly. It starts now. Keep pushing forward. The destination is COP27, taking place next year in Egypt. See you there.
Win instant cash this spring with Top Score Instant. To enter, buy any new pack of Top Score Instant 1 kg or 500 grams from any store countrywide and stand a chance to win one of 2 grand prizes of $20,000 Namibian or one of 12 weekly prizes of $5,000 Namibian. SMS Instant to 24442. Competition ends 30 November 2021. T's and C's apply. Top Score Instant, a proud product of Namib Mills.
It's important to be an active bystander because there are many reasons why a woman would not report an incident of violence. If I had a friend who was a silent victim of violence, I would ask how they were and if they needed help. I would share resources with them, document the incident, ensuring a trail of evidence, and I would support them emotionally. Some women experience violence and choose not to report, usually due to a fear of backlash they might receive from their community. One of the focuses UN Women has is to strengthen survivor and victim protection services, considering this cultural fear consequence. We must invest in women organizations and invest in laws and policies that ensure inclusive services. We must leave no one behind.
Strike it gold and win $5,000 Namibian in cash with Neo Paints. Simply buy Neo Paints products from the selected range and stand a chance to get one of 12 mystery buckets filled with gold paint. All 12 winners will each get 3 extra paint buckets equal to their purchase. One to replace the gold paint, the second to use on your project, and the third to give to a charity of their choice. One winner can score another $10,000 Namibian by showing us your creative use of the golden paint. The best project wins the cash. Offer is valid from 27 September to 18 December at your favorite hardware store nationwide. Visit us at neopaints.com for more competition details and follow us on Facebook for weekly competition updates. Neo Paints, a coat of excellence.
Africa Good Morning remains your reliable source for decentralized African news because you need to know what's happening in your neighbor's home. Keeping that in mind, we're going to cross over to Zimbabwe and have a chat with Talent Gore. Talent, wamkase.
Tamuke dukana mamkawa.
Ah, Tamuka. Now, in your first story, the Zimbabwean workforce is said to be one of the least paid in the SADC region, resulting in a mass exodus of critical staff and compromising efficiency in service delivery at various public institutions. Could you please talk about this?
So the Zimbabwean workforce is said to be one of the least paid in the SADC region, and this has resulted in brain drain. We have since seen that people are leaving Zimbabwe for other countries looking for greener pastures. So workers' unions yesterday urged Finance Minister Mthuli Ncube to review his civil service delivery budget for 2022 in order to force. The workers' unions have said that despite the fact that the workers are among those earning the least in the region, the cost of the monthly basket is highest in the region. You find that even commodities that are produced locally, they are way more expensive than those that are produced in other countries, than those that are imported from other countries. So the workforce have since presented their concerns to the government. They've presented their concerns to the finance minister, and the employer, that is the government, has not taken heed on concerns. So they say that the workers are saying that the government they don't want to be compared to other countries. So now they're saying that if they continue like this, people are going to continue leaving the country, and we're going to, us as Zimbabweans, Zimbabwe as a country is going to suffer more, and those countries that are receiving Zimbabweans, they are actually going to gain more from that, and we are going to be the ones who are going to be suffering. So the government has to work towards making sure that the brain drain is stopped with immediate effect.
Now, Talent, obviously, you are a part of the Zimbabwean workforce. Do ordinary Zimbabwean workers feel like the government will actually pull through?
Well, truth be told, the workers, they have been having these talks with the longest time, and the government just tells you that they're going to work on it, they will increase your salaries, they will do this, but they do not actually do that. They do not fulfill their promises. But this is the first time that they've actually heard the concerns of the civil servants, whereby they're actually giving them their bonuses in US dollars. They're not giving them in Zimbabwean dollars, they're giving them in US dollars. So this is the first time that they have actually listened to the concerns of the workers. But the workers are saying that this is just a one-time thing. Next year, they're just going to revert back to normal, whereby they will not be listening to the workers.
All right. Now, the WHO has said that there's no need for COVID-19 booster shots. How is this translating in Zimbabwe?
So the Zimbabwean government has directed that frontline workers with chronic conditions and the elderly get their shots with immediate effect, saying that this would strengthen their immunity against the Omicron variant. So now we have since heard from the World Health Organization saying that there is no evidence to support the claims that administering the COVID-19 booster shots for the whole population will provide greater protection against the recently detected Omicron variant. So now we have since seen that in Zimbabwe, people are actually going to get their booster shots. But now they're saying that it's now contradicting. We don't know what to do now, because the World Health Organization is saying that there's no evidence to support the claims that administering the COVID-19 booster shots will actually there's no evidence to support the claims that administering COVID-19 booster shots for the whole population will provide greater protection. So people are just going to get the booster shots because that's what the government has directed us to do. But now we are now contradicted. We don't know what to do, because the government is saying this and the World Health Organization is saying otherwise.
All right. Now, in the last of your updates, Zimbabwe airports pose aviation disaster as they are still operating with an antiquated radar system. How is this happening?
So a report of findings by the Committee on the State of the Civil Aviation Authority of Zimbabwe in April revealed that Zimbabwe's airports, they pose an aviation disaster as they are still operating with an antiquated radar system. So the report showed that the airports have poor weather detecting instruments, there are few emergency vehicles and fire stations on standby for craft landing and deplorable runways, among others. So the government has since been told to make sure that they upgrade the airports, and the report says that we cannot continue to be using this outdated system at the airport, and we can't go into 2022 using this outdated radar system. So we need to upgrade the system. So the government is now working to make sure that they do upgrade the system before this year ends. So we're not really sure if they're going to pull that up, or it's just going to be one of those whereby we're going to be using outdated systems in 2022.
I mean, it is understandably worrying. As a broadcaster, I can only imagine what it would be like trying to do a show without a mixer. It doesn't really make sense. But thank you, Talent Gore, for bringing us the news as it is from Zimbabwe.
You're welcome, and thank you very much for having me.
It's always good having you here. Now, as you heard, the Zimbabwean airport can't quite detect weather patterns as they should be able to. But here on Africa Good Morning, we've got your weather forecast for all of Africa up next. Now, two things are the top priorities, the top priority list for the entire world right now. That's health and economy. We're about to focus on the latter. Here are your economic news updates. The hidden cost of getting COVID-19 in South Africa, according to a medical aid boss. South Africans who remain unvaccinated face not only health risks, but also financially a hit, says Lee Kalakoppen, principal officer of Bonitas Medical Fund. Kalakoppen said Bonitas has been proactive in urging its members and the public to be vaccinated, with statistics showing clear evidence of the effectiveness of the vaccines. Research across the public healthcare environment has shown the same results. With this information freely available, it is disturbing that only 16,944,413 people living in South Africa have been vaccinated. This is only 35.5% of adults and 23.7% of the population. Kalakoppen said that the cost of hospital admissions, especially ICU, are very high. The average cost of admission to ICU per patient was 533,969 rand. There is no doubt that vaccinations not only save lives, but also reduce the burden on public healthcare systems. Kalakoppen said there is enough clinical evidence to show that the vaccination reduces the severity of COVID, and he encourages everyone to be vaccinated. In our second story, South African cannabis company lists on German stock exchange. SE-listed investment holding company Labatt Africa has listed its shares as a dual listing on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. Labatt listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange in 1996, repositioned and made a strategic shift to become a fully integrated cannabis healthcare company in 2019. Labatt Africa Chief Executive Officer Brian van Rooyen said the FSE listing is an exciting move for the group. It comes off the back of Germany's new coalition government planning to legalize cannabis for medicinal recreational purposes. Germany, Labatt said, is set to legalize cannabis nationwide after major parties reach an agreement. There will also be provisions related to advertising, with the intent being to restrict the promotion of cannabis, tobacco, and alcohol to deter youth use, it said, citing Der Spiegel. All right, in the next story, South Africans expected to spend over 250 billion rand this festive season. This year's festive spending is expected to increase by 20% compared with the previous year, despite household food basket contractions on the back of high food prices. Based on Statistics SA's mid-year population size estimates, this means consumers are set to pump 252 billion rand into the local economy. Of those surveyed, 41% say they are better off financially in this year's season, and only 23% say they are in the same financial position as last year. The survey also reveals that most South Africans plan to buy gifts this festive season, with 77% of respondents planning to spoil their family, up from the 75% seen in 2020, but down from the 83% seen in 2019. Now, in the last of our economic news stories, e-waste regulations come into force. The idea behind the regulations is to ensure producers take full responsibility for the life cycle of products, past the point where a consumer needs to dispose of it responsibly. The hope is that the regulations will mean electrical and electronic products, most of them potentially harmful to the environment, don't end up in landfills. The regulations are also meant to ensure products are recovered and recycled as much as possible, rather than adding to the growing e-waste problem. Companies that fail to register with the department can be prosecuted criminally, and they risk having their details handed over to the courts by the Environment Department and then being fined millions of rand, and could result in imprisonment of the directors for non-compliance. The financial impact on the consumer is up to the producer. Some producers have stated they'll internally absorb the fees. Others say their margins are too low and will have to pass them on to their customers. The consumer, in most cases, is going to have to bear the additional costs. All right, that brings us to the end of our economic news stories. Up next, economic indicators. Thank you for staying with Africa. Good morning. It's time for us to dive straight into your sports news stories. Double win for Kenya in Valencia's marathon. It was a double win for Kenya in Valencia's marathon. Lawrence Cherono celebrated victory in the men's race with Kenya's flag. Kenyan Lawrence Cherono wins the Valencia marathon in 2 hours, 5 minutes and 12 seconds. Fellow Kenyans Philemon Kacheran third and Geoffrey Kamworo comes fourth. Ethiopians Chalu Deso Gelmisa took second place. Kenya's Nancy Jelagat also celebrated victory in the women's race. Nancy Jelagat had the second fastest time ever in a marathon race by a woman debutant. Second place was taken by Ethiopians pair Etagegne Woldu Mamo and Beyenu Degefa. In our next story, football. Cameroon says biggest stadium will host AFCON matches despite construction delays. Cameroon's Minister of Sports and Physical Education, Narcisse Mowele Kombi, said on Friday that the country's biggest stadium will be able to host matches at January's Africa Cup of Nations, despite delays in completing ongoing construction work. Cameroon's government was scheduled to hand over the new 60,000-seat Olembe Stadium to sports authorities on Friday, but postponed the date indefinitely. It was the second time in less than 1 week the government had postponed the handover ceremony. Kombi said that technical delays were hindering the stadium's completion. The stadium, located 13 kilometers north of Yaoundé, is scheduled to host the opening match of AFCON on January 9 next year, with the final to take place in the same stadium on February 6. Cameroon has already inaugurated 4 other stadiums in the cities of Douala and Garoua, as well as Chinese constructed stadiums in Bafoussam and Limbe, which will also stage several AFCON matches. Sticking with football, CAF Confederation Cup, Orlando Pirates qualify for group stage after Liberia's LPRC Oilers withdraw. The CAF Confederation Cup additional second preliminary round second leg between LPRC Oilers of Liberia and South Africa's Orlando Pirates this Sunday has been cancelled after the Liberian side withdrew from this season's tournament. Confederation of African Football released a statement saying it had received a letter from Liberia FA confirming the club's withdrawal. No reason was given for the withdrawal. This is the second consecutive season that Pirates, runners-up in the competition 2015, have advanced to the group stage. This is the second match of the final qualifying round for the Confederation Cup group stage to be affected. The first one was the tie between Algerian side JS Kabylie and Eswatini's Royal Leopards, which was postponed indefinitely due to travel restrictions resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. In the last of our sports stories, we are in the world of cricket. Clinical India thrashed New Zealand to top test rankings. Indian skipper Virat Kohli hailed his clinical side after they hammered New Zealand by 372 runs to win the second test on Monday and clinch the series 1-0. Spinner Ravichandran Ashwin claimed a match tally of 8 wickets and 300 scalp on home soil as India usurped the Black Caps as the world's top-ranked test side. New Zealand, who started day 4 on 140 for 5 in their chase of an improbable 540, were all out for 167 before lunch in Mumbai. New Zealand, who doggedly hung for a draw in the opening match of the 2-test series, were undone by their batting after Ajaz's heroics. Ajaz, a left-arm spinner whose name went up on the Wankhede Honours Board on Saturday after his perfect 10, stood out with match figures of 14 for 225, the best ever by a bowler against India. To be honest, I still don't know how to put the 10 into words, said Ajaz, who was born in Mumbai but moved to Auckland with his parents in 1996. All right, that brings us to the end of our sports news updates. After the break, your headlines. Africa Good Morning has been streaming live from 7 a.m., bringing you news from Africa and beyond. Now, if you perhaps missed our top stories at the top of the hour, or if you need a recap, worry not, here are some of the headlines. Explosions, attacks in Mali, Niger kill over 100. Hundreds of women protest against gender-based violence in Ivory Coast. Aid group says tribal violence kills 24 in Sudan's Darfur. Gambia's Adama Barrow elected for a second term. The hidden cost of getting COVID-19 in South Africa, according to a medical aid boss. And in sport, double win for Kenya in Valencia's marathon. That brings us to the end of today's stories. Make sure you send us all your opinions to AGM_2centsworth at nmh.com.na. We certainly welcome anything you'd like to share with us. And if you'd like to catch a repeat of the show from 8:30, it's going to be on 1up2.com, where you can also find all of NMH's programs. And don't forget to interact with Africa Good Morning on Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to know what's on your mind. We're wrapping up a very busy year. Let's talk to each other. Let's communicate. Don't forget also, as we're talking and communicating, wear your mask, sanitize. There is a new variant out there, which is Omicron. So stay protected, get vaccinated, protect yourself in order to also protect others. From me, Ashwin Berry, I'll be looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Swera Jakanaka.